Dave Birkett here, along with Carlos Monarrez on a busy Monday. Carlos, Black Monday around the NFL. A number of firings. Of course, the Lions already made some moves there after Thanksgiving when they fired Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn, and they are now neck deep in coach and general manager searches. And I guess let's start with that news. First of all, I think there were about 9 names that came out today that. I don't know if request is the right word, but that the Lions had submitted their slips to interview coach and GMs. Daryl Bevell, of course, who they don't have to submit a slip for, is going to interview with the Lions on Tuesday. Eric Bieniemy, Robert Saleh, among the other coaches. I know Arthur Smith was reported. I was told that Arthur probably is not going to interview here. That would have been next week anyways. Dan Campbell from the New Orleans Saints also in that mix. They've already interviewed Marvin Lewis. And then on the GM front, not to throw a bunch of names at you here, Carlos, but on the GM front, who we got? George Payton from the Minnesota Vikings, Brad Holmes from the Rams, Jeff Ireland from the Saints. I know there's probably somebody I'm forgetting there, but does anyone jump out at you? Who is the must hire, Carlos? What are the Detroit Lions going to do?
I'll be honest, Dave. I don't have a strong sense of who they should hire. I mean, you would guess that Robert Saleh is the leader in the clubhouse. He seems like the logical pick. It's just, what is this? How many coaches now for me? I wasn't really covering the team during the Marinelli search. So Schwartz, what's his name? Caldwell.
What's his name? Winningest coach of modern Lions history here.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Coach. I apologize to Coach Caldwell. It's just, who knows? I mean, it's just, I feel like Saleh to me feels like Patricia and like Vrabel the last time. Those guys made sense. They came from the defensive side. They were supposed to be really smart. Patricia was supposed to be the guy who had this overall sense of the whole team, not just the defense. That's what they're saying about Saleh. So there's a lot of, Kyle Shanahan saying that he wants, he doesn't want anybody to be smart enough to hire Saleh so that he comes back to him, but he doesn't see it happening. You just don't know. You don't know what their visions are going to be, what their staffs are going to look like, who they're going to pair with as GM, how that's going to work, what Stafford's future. There's so many moving parts on this team. I think it's a lot more, when Patricia came in, he changed the team slowly. He changed it as the way he wanted. Caldwell didn't change it that much, really. He was here to fix Stafford and get the most out of Stafford, but there wasn't going to be this wholesale change. This is really the first real big rebuild that we're going to see from the ground up. It should be from the ground up. There's some pieces, of course, but I don't have a sense. I think Saleh is going to be the guy. He just seems, but do you have a sense of who it should be or could be?
Well, no, look, Terry Fontenot is the other name that I neglected to mention earlier from the New Orleans Saints, one of the assistant GMs there, along with Jeff Ireland, who will interview. Now, look, here's my read on things so far, right? I don't think there are a ton of great head coaching candidates out there, right? I think the assistant coaching ranks have been picked over. And I don't mean that some of these guys won't be good head coaches. I think they will, right? I think there's lots to like about a Robert Saleh. Eric Bieniemy, obviously, we heard what Reggie Ragland and Chase Daniel said about him. So I think there's lots to like about him. Even Daryl Bevell, right? Not that he's going to be Lions coach, but I think, Daryl's done a good job here the last 5 weeks, and you hear how players talk about him being a leader. So I think a lot of these candidates have the potential to be good coaches, but there's just no must hire guy like there has been in past hiring cycles. And that guy hasn't always worked out. I mean, Matt Patricia was the guy, a couple of years ago that was the hot commodity, but there's not that guy this year, and so I think that's why you see the names like Urban Meyer and Matt Campbell and some of these college coaches come up that, NFL teams are sort of, they're looking around for, maybe different fits or different ways to fill that spot, and there's 6 jobs open. And so who knows, somebody's going to hire a really good coach and a couple teams are going to hire really bad coaches. And you just hope the Lions are one of them. I agree with you that, Saleh he's going to be in the mix. He's from here. He's a really good story. I think he would check off a lot of boxes. The name that sort of intrigues me, Carlos, and I'm probably alone on this. I mentioned him in my coaching stock watch a week or two ago, is Dan Campbell from the New Orleans Saints. When you're talking about Vrabel, he's the guy to me that sort of is that Mike Vrabel, former player, leader, in the the locker room. Got to have good coordinators around him, but he's from that Bill Parcells tree, and so you sort of, if it was a him Jeff Ireland pairing, you could sort of see how that could work. Because the Lions want somebody with previous experience. Ireland was a GM in Miami. Dan Campbell was an interim head coach in Miami. Took over for Joe Philbin. So I think there's a lot more, I don't know, higher upside names in the GM ranks because there haven't been as many GM hires of late. But the Lions aren't interviewing some of those names, at least not yet. The Ed Dodds, who again, my understanding was he probably wouldn't want to come to Detroit anyways. Maybe he will. Maybe that changes. Mike Borgonzi from Kansas City. Some of those names are not on the Lions list right now. They seem to be wanting experience at the position, and that's why I keep hearing Thomas Dimitroff. That's why I brought up Jeff Ireland. That's why I think ultimately some of those names will be the names that will be in the mix for the Lions at the end of the day.
The one thing with Campbell that concerns me and with bieniemy too is they haven't called the offense or the defense. They haven't. I don't even know if Campbell's been a coordinator. Has he?
So can we drill on that for a sec? Because I think you're right. Like neither one of them has, and that's been the concern, right? And that's been a concern with Eric Bieniemy. But if you have the right pieces in place, calling plays, does it matter a whole lot? I don't know. How do you feel about that? Like if whoever, I don't know who Dan Campbell's offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator would be, but if Dan Campbell doesn't plan to call plays, if he just plans to be, Mike Vrabel, then does it matter if he doesn't have that play calling experience?
I want some kind of executive experience, from a coach. And I don't know, how much to read into what Sheila Ford Hamp said about that recently. She kind of was wishy-washy in what she put out to I think a statement to fans about we want, some
the internal email. Yep.
Whether that's more about the general manager side than it is coach, who knows? And then she kind of walked it back a little bit later when she talked to us. It's not a must, but if you're going to be a head coach, I want you to have commanded at least one side of the ball, had a whole defensive, team meeting on this is how we're doing it. This is our plan. It's not to say that it's not possible. And it's understanding, like someone like Vrabel hadn't even been coaching that long really, and he had 1 year of coordinator experience, I think. So it's a chance. It's a gamble, I think, to do that. Dan Campbell was with the Lions, and we've talked about that a little bit before, and just how, he had a pretty good presence to him. Anybody who watched him on Hard Knocks when the Dolphins were on, he had a pretty good presence to him. But I'd rather have a guy who's been a coordinator for a little while, who has that. I mean, and that's where Saleh checks those boxes, where he really, people just can't say enough. And they said the same thing about Patricia, like he knows how to lead man and everybody loves him. This coach is he's tough but fair. He knows everything about football, all that stuff. And, I don't know, sometimes maybe you do have to take a little bit of a chance if you feel better, about bieniemy or Campbell. And maybe they don't have the perfect LinkedIn resume, but that's where you're going to have to make that determination. And I don't know, maybe that's where someone like Spielman can sniff it out a little bit more and say, this guy really knows what he's talking about. He hasn't been a head coach and he hasn't been coordinator, but he knows, he understands how plays are called. He understands all that stuff. Yep. So it's not a deal breaker, but it's a concern.
Do you update your LinkedIn profile?
I'm doing it right now. Talk to Dave Birkett, Mr. Dave Birkett.
Yeah. Now, Dan Campbell went 5-7 as interim coach with the Dolphins when he took over for an 0-4 Philbin team, if I'm not mistaken. So you're right. He hasn't had the executive experience in terms of calling an offense or a defense, but he has sat in that big chair for a little bit. So I think maybe that's why I'm a little more comfortable with him than I would be with somebody else who just hadn't had any sort of experience. But look, I don't know. I mean, I think it's interesting. One of the questions I've gotten on Twitter a bunch and on email a bunch is, why are the Lions interviewing head coaches right now, when they don't have a GM in place? And I just want to put this out there. And certainly this is a question that we will ask Rod Wood when he talks this week, because I think it's an important question to have answered. But the two things that I understand, and I have to say too, Carlos, what you had said about the experience thing, my understanding from talking to people in Allen Park is that they do want experience. They would prefer experience Doesn't mean it's necessary, but they want experience at one of the two positions, if possible, after everything they've gone through the last couple of years. As for why they're interviewing head coaches now, I think there's two things at play. One is if they find the right guy and he's the head coach, and they find that before they find the right GM, then they would hire that guy and let him, maybe have some input in terms of, who the hire would be at GM. And I don't think that's going to happen with the Lions, but they're at least open to having that coach down structure rather than the GM down structure. And then the other thing is just with the way the NFL calendar is, let's say you want to hire a guy like Eric Bieniemy or whatever GM you're bringing in wants to hire an Eric Bieniemy. Well, you need to interview him now because he's not available if you don't interview him now until after his team is knocked out of the playoffs, which could be, after the Super Bowl. So from an organizational standpoint, you have to find out if he's okay, if your owner, president, are comfortable with whoever the coaching candidate is that the GM wants to bring in. So I think, I don't know if these are breadcrumbs for who they might hire, a Saleh and bring in his GM, or a Dan Campbell and bring in his GM, if Terry Fontenot is the guy or something. But I think that's why it's important for the Lions to meet with some of those people now.
What's your opinion about who's more important to hire, the GM or the Lion or the coach this cycle for the Lions?
Well, I think, it's about players at the end of the day, right? You got to have the horses if you're going to win the race. So I think, you need to make sure you get the right GM. But, that being said, I think a coach down structure can work, right? I mean, that's essentially what New England is. Bill Belichick has all the power there. That's what Washington is with Ron Rivera. They're going to hire a GM this year, but Rivera is the guy that is essentially the leader of that organization. And so, if it was the right person, I think, the Lions should be comfortable, going that direction. I just don't know that, given the dearth of candidates out there right now, right? If this was last year and had they made the move last year and they went out and got a Ron Rivera, well, I would feel comfortable with Ron Rivera being that guy, but they decided to sit tight for a year. And now you look at the coaching landscape, and outside of an Urban Meyer, who you might be willing to give that control to, maybe there's another college coach out there that you might be willing to give that control to, a Matt Campbell, a Lincoln Riley, if you were to lure him. And he's not coming to Detroit, but if that were the case, you would give him that power because he's an impressive enough coach that he would need that. And that would be the only way to get him to town.
That's what I think is, if it's one or the other, if you have a star head coach, then you lean that side, and, that's who you focus on. If you have a star, general manager, you go that route and you make it more attractive, and you can sort of pick the coach kind of. And I agree with you. I think, I don't, who knows, Saleh might end up winning 5 Super Bowls wherever he goes, but it doesn't feel right now like there's a star candidate out there. The biggest thing is Urban Meyer being tied to Jacksonville, and he wants $12 million a year. That's the closest thing to a sure bet of any of the hirings, I think. But
no, you're right. Urban Meyer, or the reports that came out yesterday, John Schneider or Kevin Colbert. I mean, if the Lions were to be able to lure one of those GMs from a Seattle or from a Pittsburgh, that would be an absolute home run hire. And then you'd feel comfortable about where the organization is. Long shot, I know, but hey, if that were to happen, I think that would be the best hit the Lions could get.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's honestly, because if you do have a chance at Kevin Colbert, with Pittsburgh, or Schneider with Seattle, and those guys have done it, they have done it. And that's what I hope that's what Sheila was really talking about. Someone who has experience building a franchise, a winning franchise, has gotten them, because I mean, you're right. Unless Bill Belichick becomes available or whatever, or I would even say Mike Zimmer, guys who've once been successful and been, like, unless there's someone out there, there aren't that many, right? Sean Payton, Pete Carroll, there aren't that many guys out there who've been consistent winners in the NFL the last 5 to 10 years. So you gotta organizationally, and I if I were king of the Lions, I'd still be under Chris Spielman probably, but if I were king of the Lions, I would definitely say, start with your general manager, your roster building, your personnel, your scouting department, all that stuff, have that in place, and that was the unfortunate thing about Bob Quinn was, he was just going to come here to try to be the Patriots, and build the Patriots. And at first it was kind of wishy-washy because of Caldwell, but it never felt like I always would have wondered, what would you have done if you had been the guy? If we had like, oh man, we want Bob Quinn. How do you want to build this? Would he have tried to recreate the Patriots, or we've done something different? But those guys, I don't mind if they try to recreate the Steelers and the Seahawks. I think it can be done. It's not so because it doesn't rely on Bill Belichick to make it all work. Yeah, I hope, I don't know. That's a good question. And as far as the interview process for those guys, for general managers, can they interview them anytime, or do they have to wait for their teams to not be playing as well?
GMs can interview anytime. That's why you see some of the Saints guys interviewing this week. And they can be hired at any time. It's different, I guess, if you're a sitting GM, there'd probably have to be some compensation worked out. But for for a guy like let's say a Terry Fontenot, right, a Jeff Ireland with the Saints, if the Lions decide to move on one of those guys, they could act immediately and make that hire, even though the Saints may still be playing. So you mentioned being the Lion King or whatever it was. Carlos, if you were the Lion King for the day, because I wanted to bring up two other things that we talked to the players today. Today was virtual locker cleanout day. And I thought there were a couple interesting things that were said. One, Taylor Decker said, he planned to go to Rod Wood and sit down with Rod Wood and offer some insight as to, players in the locker room that should be there, that shouldn't, coaches that should be there, that shouldn't. Naturally, Matthew Stafford's name came up, and he said, sign Stafford to a lifetime contract. And Darrell Bevell said, Matthew Stafford you can win a Super Bowl with this guy. So if you were the Lions, if you were king for the day, whatever you called it, I don't know, would you listen to Taylor Decker? Would you take him up on his word to keep Matthew Stafford? Because Carlos, look, whatever you say, I know we've talked about this before, right? And so I know I'm probably going down the same rabbit hole that we always have, but you got to admit, right? The not just the performance, but the guttiness that he showed to be able to get out there, the way that players responded to that, appreciate that, the way coaches appreciate that, that leaves an impression on people. And so from that standpoint, it may be tough to get rid of a guy that, means so much to so many people in the locker room.
No, Dave, you and I have been around way too long. You know that the second that Stafford is traded and gone, it's going to be like, well, that's in the past. We're talking about the future now. Even Decker will be like, hey, Matt was a great guy, but this is about the future. We're gonna support Justin Fields, and he's gonna be the guy now, and blah blah blah. Whoever they draft, So they're saying that now, and there's an emotional, all these locker room cleanouts, and Decker said more than usually the guys say in this situation, but
I like the leadership of him, by the way, to say that he's going to go to Rod. I don't know that Rod will take it, but I like when players are like, you know what, I'm invested in here. And so I want my voice to be heard, and whether that's about them, other people, whatever. So I give Decker credit. I like what he said in that regard.
It was unsolicited. He said he wanted to go and talk to him, and it's not common for a left tackle, who's not Jake Long or someone like this, to say, or who was the guy in Cleveland, Joe Thomas, an overarching, figure in the, to say, I'm going to go. I don't know if he's even going to open the door when I knock on it, but I want to go talk to him and say, you guys signed me to a contract. I want to win here. I want to stay here. I believe Stafford's the guy. I'm going to lobby for my dude. Really good for him to do that. That's true leadership, by the way. And I'm not going to names, but, let's just say someone's name who rhymes with Matthew Stafford has never really gone that far in saying he's lobbying. The only person he's ever lobbied
for Jim Bob Cooter. Come on.
He lobbied for Cooter. There was the one guy he lobbied for because Cooter let him do whatever he wanted. I'm sorry, I take that back. As far as players and all that, and I don't know.
I know he had some sit downs with Rod Wood, like dinner with Rod Wood. I don't know if he went about talking about players or who should go, who should stay, what they need, but we don't know exactly what goes on behind closed doors.
True. He's never publicly told us that he's done that on his own. Like, I'm going to go to Rod, or I'm going to go to whoever, Bob, and but maybe they normally have a sit down or something as a exit interview anyway. But I like it. And, once if Decker gets to talk to Rod after he pushes Dan Orlovsky, Pete Schrager, and you out of the way and gets to sit in that chair and advocate for Stafford, I understand that there's a lot of respect for Stafford in the building. I get it, and he's played through a lot, but people aren't going to like that I say this, but ultimately, when players want to play, especially Stafford on Sunday in the season finale, I kind of thought that was a selfish move on his part. He wants to prove that he can get out there. He wants to prove that he can throw the ball, and he knows he's playing a terrible defense, by the way, so he's going to throw 300 or 400. And there was a play, I don't know if you remember this, but it was in the first half, and he was all, he couldn't move very well. And there was a play, he was looking downfield, right to the middle of the field, left of the field. There was a huge opening to his right. And I think it was, whatever, 1st and 10, 2nd and 10, whatever. He could have easily run for a first down. It was the sea had parted. Either he didn't see it or he didn't want to run. But that's the kind of thing where a guy who's not compromised can make that play easily. And that's where I feel like he was, like we've talked about this before, he's worried about Wally Pipp. They're all worried about Wally Pipp. They want to make sure, and Stafford knows he needs to raise his value. He needs to prove, if he doesn't play that last game, oh, well, Stafford couldn't finish the second to last game. He didn't play the last game. Is there something wrong with him? Should we trade? I don't know if we should trade for him. You need to keep your value up as a player, even when you have a contract. You need to make sure that everybody, and especially in football, that you're out there. Because look at what they're saying about Kenny Golladay. Right now, Kenny Golladay is taking a lot of heat, because he didn't show up, and why couldn't he? And that's
this week. Stack down. Make sure you click on it. No, look,
stack down.
I'm definitely not litigating this again about Stafford's toughness and whether he should have played and all that. But I will say, and look, I firmly believe that, he's been here 12 years and he hasn't won anything. And I don't think he's the biggest reason for that, right? I don't think he's the biggest part of the problem, but I also think it's okay to move on at this point. But in order to move on, you have to have somebody, that can take over, and who knows if there will be a capable person there. So I don't advocate trading Stafford. But I would be fine. And I would advocate for drafting the right quarterback to sit behind him for a year, to play behind him. But we'd have to see how that plays out. But Carlos, the one thing that struck me yesterday, I was watching that Sunday night game because I had to, write the Lions draft order story, and it wasn't going to be complete till after that Eagles Washington game. And I couldn't help but thinking, as the Eagles had Nate Sudfeld, on the field, for the final quarter, just, barfing all over himself. And, the entire game was a sham there in the fourth quarter. And you could even see it as they cut to players on the sideline who are looking like, what is going on right now? Like, that's what struck me, that's what the Lions would be like. I feel like that's what Lions players would be like if they got rid of Stafford and decided to go with Chase Daniel and a young guy or whatever it is, right? Like, they would be like, what are we doing? What am I doing why would I give everything I have for this organization that doesn't give everything to me in return? And again, there are bigger picture reasons why you may make that move. And I'm not saying don't. I'm just saying, like, the way that players respond to Matthew Stafford, I just sort of got that sense watching that game yesterday that if they moved on from Matt, that there would be enough players who would just, who just wouldn't understand, wouldn't grasp the move when a guy plays 12 years for an organization and plays through everything that he plays through. And then all of a sudden you get rid of him and you start this rebuild over when he still has, good years left in him. So again, I'm not saying it's the wrong move. I'm just saying that I think that's, maybe one thing that we don't take into account on this side, that you do have a locker room that responds to Stafford. And so I don't know, does that at all factor into the decision for the next coach / general manager / Spielman that comes aboard?
Well, I hope that, one thing, the Eagles thing is a mess with Carson Wentz wanting to trade and all this stuff. That is just, a poop show over there. So there's more to it than just what are we doing with Nate Sudfeld? That's a whole nother thing. But with Stafford, the players, let's not forget this. As much as they might respect Stafford, they all know that he's dealing with things that they deal with all the time. Trey Flowers just told us he was playing with a fractured forearm. Okay.
Broke it in the game, but yeah, he wasn't going to come back. The game. He was going to come back. Even though it might not have totally healed. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they've all had issues, Jeff Okudah probably should have had surgery before the season. They're all dealing with things. And as much as you respect Stafford, they all know it's not just a question of, if you're going to get replaced, it's when you're going to get replaced, not for long, right? In the NFL. So they know this. They don't ultimately really care that much about, a 12-year veteran, how can you get rid of him? I mean, honestly, the same reason that you're saying you don't have a problem, you're not advocating for them trading Stafford, but you don't have a problem getting rid of him. The reason you don't have a problem getting rid of him is because he hasn't done it. He hasn't won. If he would have won, if he was going to win, he would have won by now. I mean, it's just, if he beats the odds and Jim Caldwell tells you that he's in year 14, quarterbacks really start taking off, then maybe he's going to do it. Hey, and I will say this, if Stafford goes somewhere else this year, next year, or whenever, and he wins there, I will be the first one to write, I was wrong. I apologize, for Stafford had it in him the whole time. And, but this constant narrative of he's not the biggest problem and he's still good and he gives you the best chance and he's the best since Bobby Lane and all. There's so much equivocating when it comes to Stafford. It's like, how about if you just do it? How about if you just win? How about if in 2014 you throw to Calvin Johnson instead, wide open in the middle of the field instead of to face guarded Andrew Pettigrew? Okay, how about that? How about you make a play when the chips are down, when everything's on the line in big moments? It's not all on Stafford, but like I wrote it today. He needed to play great this year. He played well, played good, but he needed to play great. And that's where this franchise has been. They've needed a great quarterback to lift them. They needed an Aaron Rodgers type guy. And Stafford isn't that guy, which is, that's not his fault. He is as good as he is. But maybe you need that Lamar Jackson, that Patrick Mahomes, that Deshaun Watson, that really potentially game-changing, just another level to get you to where you need to go.
Carlos, I think you are right in a lot of what you said, but there's only one Patrick Mahomes. He's a generational talent. So those guys don't come around all the time. And, with Stafford, you're right. That's, I don't know that he's going to win here. And that's why I am. You're right. That's why I'm comfortable moving on, because after 12 years, it hasn't happened. But I totally lost my train of thought with what I was going to say. But that's all right. Because I think when it comes to moving on from Matthew, if it happens, he's had plenty of time, here in Detroit and he hasn't got it done. And the bigger part of it, this is what I was going to say, the bigger part of it is not like, I don't see the Lions next year as being this great Super Bowl contender. And this is, I guess this is why I'm comfortable moving on, because when you look at the big picture of things, right, he's only has 2 years left on his deal. And yeah, Matthew has several good years left in him, but you also got to pay him, and he's also going to be 33, and he's also had these injuries. And so, by the time you're ready to contend, where is he at from a contractual standpoint, from a health standpoint? Where might a young guy be? I think all of that needs to be factored in, and that's why I've always been okay with that move of drafting the young guy and preparing for that guy to take over for Matthew, because after 12 years, maybe it is time for a total rebuild of this organization. And I know you're going to have something else to say on Stafford. I can see that finger up here, like you're, Austin Powers or whatever. But I want to throw this out there, because as usual, we go long. So I just want you to, as you ruminate and make your last point about Stafford, I also wanted, since you mentioned Jeff Okudah and his injury, I also wanted to bring up what he said about the dysfunction in Detroit this year. And, he compared it to, he said, you come from Ohio State, you come from a blue blood program like that, where you're used to everything being great, right? He lost 4 games in 3 years, and he lost 4 in the month of November in Detroit. Right. So he certainly was not used to what he was stepping into, and the dysfunction that was here. I give Okudah credit for, talking openly and saying some things that other vets wouldn't, and acknowledging that he was part of the problem with the injury and just not communicating clear enough. So I liked what Jeff Okudah had to say today. But I think it also, everything that he said points to why, they're dropping a bomb on the organization right now and rebuilding everything.
Yeah, I think that, as you said, you didn't know what he was stepping into. He definitely stepped into it when he used the word dysfunction. He's going to get a little talking to about that from probably Rod Wood or someone else in the organization, maybe Darrell Bevell. Bevell kind of said he wanted to talk to him. He was very eager to talk to him. Probably that was one of the reasons. That's a strong word to use, dysfunction. And we all know that there probably is has been a lot of dysfunction, with Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn. And it was maybe it changed a little bit later, but at the beginning it was a very top heavy management style. This is what you're going to do. This is how you're going to do it. And even Okuda, when we asked him, what was the big thing you took away from your time with Patricia? And he said, do your job, which is the New England thing, right? Do your job. Everybody's got to do their job. And that's kind of how, you're a chess piece, you're a pawn in those organizations. You have a specific job, do your job, don't try to do more than what your job is. And that doesn't sit well with all players. So, and this is the great thing about Okuda that people don't understand. He's a really smart guy, and he's the kind of introspection it takes to say, I came from a program where everything's great all the time. We win. We don't have any of these issues. It's nothing, we're winners who win. And he come here in the NFL and it's like, and I'm sure he looked around to other friends who were on other NFL teams and like, wow, we lose a lot and we get criticized a lot. And we got mean guys like Birkett, giving us stock downs, so, as opposed to the Columbus discount.
Off. I wrote that back in September. Don't do it yet. Young guy, first year, 21 years old. Don't write him off.
Yeah. So yeah, he, let's say there's dysfunction in almost every sports team, right? Pro sports team, any team, but especially the struggling professional ones. There's going to be dysfunction. There's going to be problems. And when you have coaching changes, that's a symptom of it. So he said what was real, and I hope he doesn't get too chastised for talking to us that way and being honest about that, because, sometimes you need that to move on. So I hope he has a bigger voice. Hope he's not worried about, voicing his opinion, but he's absolutely right.
I don't think, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, just, I think his point was more better communication probably, right? From the front office, coaches on down to the players.
And I will say, I did not take it as Bevel was angry about that comment. I think he just was saying like, yeah, you have a certain perspective, and obviously Okuda went on IR shortly after Bevel took the job, did not play a game after Bevel was interim head coach. So he said he wasn't around him there that much. So I think his point was that, if I was around him, maybe he wouldn't have seen the dysfunction, or maybe I could understand the dysfunction that he was talking about and help teach him in that regard, right? Help him realize, what's real about the NFL, what's not, what you have to get through. And so I think that's all part of it. And look, like I said, don't write Jeff Okuda off as a player. I wouldn't write Matthew Stafford off as a Lion just yet. And certainly I as I said, I think it was good to hear Taylor Decker take some leadership, to be a guy that's willing to put himself out there and go to a team president and say, you know what, these are guys in the locker room that we can do without. These are coaches that we need on our staff. These are my thoughts. Do with them what you want. But I like a person who's willing to do something like that. Carlos, I'm going to go back word because we've probably been going way too long here, and we're gonna do another one of these this week because there's Rod Wood is talking and there's so much coaching and GM stuff. But you got the final word, Stafford, whatever you want. Not even going to get a rebuttal out of me. So go ahead and say what you want here.
Well, I just had a question for you. It's a quick question. You can answer it quickly. Is just when you were when you were talking about Stafford and he's the best quarterback who's ever played or whatever. Sure, he's the toughest NFL player in the history of the game.
Best after Orlovsky. Go ahead.
Well, let me ask you this: how much do you think that's going to color when the GM, especially the general manager, comes in and coach? When they come in and they interview, they're going to read what's being said about Matthew Stafford. Don't you think that's going to color their opinion? Like, wow, this is going to be really, I'd like to move on from Stafford. I'd like to see what I can get for him in trade, but I'm worried that he's too popular. Like, how much is this going to affect them, do you think?
So I'll tell you two things. I don't think it will. As I said last week in our video, right? Yes, Stafford will, or I think the GM will lean towards keeping Stafford because that's what, they're conservative by nature and they look at a situation and I'm going to win next year and this guy's going to help me and he's a good quarterback. So ultimately, I think the next GM and coach will want to keep Matthew Stafford. It's that sort of thing that we talked about before, right? Where, you got a couple coaches fired, not personally, he didn't get them fired, but why you can outlast a coach in the NFL when you're a good player, a good quarterback. But if a GM really looks at it, I think there are enough people in this town that are saying, I'm comfortable with getting rid of Matthew Stafford, as good as he's been, that after 12 seasons, that GM can take some some comfort or have some cover if he wanted to draft a young quarterback and say, hey, this is the direction that I'm going down, because I can see, down, on the not too distant horizon that we're going to need a quarterback, and given Matthew's age and contract and health and everything else. And so I look at it a little bit different, and I can see that next GM looking at this and saying, man, there's a lot of people in town that are, for getting rid of Stafford, and I'm for keeping him. So maybe I need to broaden my horizons a little bit, or maybe I'm okay with, even though I really want to keep him, maybe I'm okay with starting to plan for the future a little bit.
Yeah, and I just, my last thing is just like, there's three prongs to it, right? It's ownership and the top management people like Rod Wood. What's their opinion of Stafford? Then there's the Taylor Deckers and the players, like what's their opinion of Stafford? And then there's the media and the fans, like what's their opinion of Stafford? And we know the players where they stand. We generally know where the media and fans stand, but then Rod and Sheila, where do they stand? They may end up being the deciding vote on how much you're willing to let the GM wheel and deal and keep their options open and whatever it might be. So I do just worry that there's a lot of information those guys are gonna have to deal with.
The fourth prong is what Matthew Stafford wants to do. And he has not spoken about what he wants to do, or he has not said clearly what he wants to do. And that is why a lot of people, myself included, do wonder if he wants to go start anew somewhere else. And when Dan Orlovsky is speaking, maybe on your behalf, or, what some people believe, but when Dan Orlovsky is putting it out there, that maybe Matthew Stafford would like to go somewhere else to finish however much longer he has left in his career, right? Let's say 2 years on this contract, another 5 years on the next one. If he wants to go somewhere else to finish his career, I think that has to be taken into account too, that, the guy's been here for a long time, and you don't want an unhappy quarterback, an unhappy leader. And frankly, maybe you part of you does want to see him go and have some success somewhere else. So I think that's something that, the next GM, coach, ownership, everyone will have to consider as well.
What's your best guess? Because Stafford's never going to tell us. What's your best guess? What he wants?
Well, I think, as he said, right, he has to get away from the season and decompress and I think if you talk to him 2 weeks ago, maybe even if you talk to him today, if you talked to him a month ago when everything was going crazy left and right, he would have wanted out. And maybe he does today. But maybe when you come and sit down, it's like when Kelvin Johnson told everyone he was going to retire, right? And Barry Johnson, not everyone, but when he first told people he was going to retire right after that season, and they said, take some time to think about it. Right. And when Barry Sanders told some people after the last game in 1998 that he was thinking about retiring, and, people just kind of brushed off, it's the end of the season, right? You'll change your mind. Maybe Matthew Stafford doesn't change his mind. I don't know what he's thinking, but maybe he doesn't change his mind what he's thinking right now. But I also know that, when you have some time and some separation from what's going on in a season and all the grotesqueness of everything that's happened, and you can sort of sit down with your family and you can relax and you can maybe see, well, all right, I like this coach, I like the moves they made, maybe things do change a little bit. So that's why people always say never make a decision right after the dust settles on a season, and see what happens down the road. I guess we'll find out soon enough. We're going to leave it there, even though I told Carlos I give him the last word. I'm going to take the last word because we're probably closing in on the 30-minute mark once again. So that'll do it for us. We'll have another one of these at some point this week because there's lots going on in Lions Land. For Carlos Monarrez, I'm Dave Birkett, Freak.com.